On page 318 of this book, the author makes the assumption that people capable of conscious-controlled dreams are the first representatives of the next stage of Homo sapiens evolution. Because for more than 80% of the world's population, such dreams are not natural. You'll say that not all books are equally useful. Yes, but this is a world bestseller written by a professor of neurobiology who has spent more than 20 years studying sleep. Here he cites the most recent research, and I found this book not in the popular psychology department, but in the medical department. I've never managed my own, and I have no idea what it's like. And sleep is not something that comes easily and effortlessly to me. I've always envied people who can fall asleep for an hour at lunchtime, but as they say, those who are unhappy and those who don't sleep well tend to be proud of it. Matthew Walker, that's the name of the author of a book about a new species of man, may be an exaggeration, but there is one genius who has had an experience of lucid dreaming that you wouldn't call an ordinary man. Meet Richard Feynman. He's so cool that when he was only 25 years old, the United States government called him to the Manhattan Project to make an atomic bomb. And that's not his only credit, to say the least. He could crack safes, played the drums brilliantly, drew great pictures, and dreamed of visiting Tuva. And when he got a call at 4 a.m. to tell him that he had won the Nobel Prize in physics, he said he was asleep and hung up. Yes, he liked to sleep like everyone else, but he liked puzzles even more. Sleep and puzzles, you'll soon find out how related they are. From childhood, Feynman considered sleep his unsolved problem, because when he was a child, his father gave him a puzzle like this. Suppose Martians come to Earth, and these Martians don't know what sleep is. They're always awake. They don't know this ridiculous phenomenon we call sleep. And they ask you questions like, what does it feel like when you fall asleep? What happens to you when you fall asleep? Does your thinking stop, or does your thought process become slower and slower? How does unconsciousness really happen? Probably everyone in childhood tried to catch that very moment of falling asleep. And here I was trying, but each time I just found myself waking up in the morning. I couldn't remember that moment or that thought on which I fell asleep. The oddity was added by the fact that in my childhood, I did not close my eyes before falling asleep. I was not afraid of the monster from the closet, but I just could not fall asleep if I did not see anything. And so you lie there. You're like this with open eyes studying the ceiling, and then one morning. In my sleep, of course, my eyes were closed. I didn't sleep like Major Payne. I must have closed my eyes before I went to sleep, but even that I didn't remember. As an undergraduate, Feynman decided to find the answer to his father's problem of exactly how the stream of consciousness ends when a person falls asleep. He lowered the curtains in his room, turned off the lights, and went to bed, trying to figure out what exactly was happening to him in the moment before sleep. The first thing he noticed, all sorts of side effects, such as the fact that he kept thinking, seeing silent conversations with himself. Along with this, ghastly, various visual images flashed in the darkness on the back of his eyelids. And at one point, something unnatural happened. Feynman noticed that being on the edge of sleep and wakefulness is able to think in parallel about two things. Cool, yeah, but there's absolutely no way to utilize it, because it's a wandering thought that has arisen in your head beyond your will. And the dumb thing is that as soon as you notice that you're thinking about two things right now, that process is immediately interrupted. Feynman says that when you fall asleep, the thoughts continue to run their course, but become less and less logically connected. Interestingly, you don't notice this lack of logical connection at all until you ask yourself, what made me think of that? And trying hard to trace the origins of this thought, you cannot remember anything in the end, and then you suddenly realize that you have forgotten the thought to which you wanted to trace. That is, you have an illusion of logical connection till the last, despite the fact that thoughts become more and more absurd. In the end, when the connection between thoughts is lost completely, that's when you fall asleep. Do you remember how you got here? One day, while once again watching himself fall asleep, Feynman realized that he had fallen asleep and was having a dream, and that he was still watching it. He was not seeing a black and white dream, but a vividly colored dream that he could control. That's when his nocturnal experiments began. Feynman's conscious, juicy dreams were also very precise. If he dreamed of a red-haired girl in the grass, he could see every hair of her hair with the accompanying physical effects like refraction of sunlight. Of course, not all of his dreams were manageable or realistic. Like everyone else, sometimes he dreamed something absurd and metaphorical. For example, 3 billiard balls of different colors, one of which did not want to go into the hole. These balls, as Feynman woke up and realized, represented 3 girls he liked, one of whom had gone abroad. For a long time studying his dreams, Feynman makes worthy attempts, but still could not comprehend their mystery and purpose. This video may seem strange to you because I'm not going to talk about dreams in general as a phenomenon, and in fact, not even about conscious dreams. It's about the psychosis that happens to you every night. Yes, last night you had a terrible psychosis, and this night it will happen again. And before you dismiss your diagnosis, Matthew Walker has 5 compelling pieces of evidence. First, when you dreamt last night, you saw something that wasn't really there. It's called a hallucination. Second, you believed something that couldn't really be true, which is basically a delusion. Third, you were confused about time, place, and identity, so you were disoriented. Fourth, you had radical swings of emotion, or, as psychiatrists say, you were emotionally labile. Fifth, waking up in the morning, you forgot, if not everything, then most of what happened in the dream. You have amnesia. Imagine if all this had happened while you were awake. Yes, you would have been called an ambulance immediately. However, for reasons that are only now becoming clear, the brain state called the phase, REM sleep, and dreaming, that is, the mental experience that this phase is accompanied by. This is a completely normal both biological and psychological process. Not only normal, but also extremely important, as we'll see shortly. One of the main functions of sleep is to build up immune barriers to defend against viral threats from the outside world, a task that it does brilliantly. But can we say that dreams themselves do something similar? Remember how in Nolan's movie, Inception, a person's subconscious mind defended itself against outsiders trying to extract information in their dreams. It was even possible to train projections of one's subconscious and turn them into professional assassins to better protect one's own secrets. If someday they invent the same technology of co-sleeping as in the movie, many people will, not illusorily, need such protection. I want you to realize that it is not Philistines at all, but real researchers who invest in the concept of dreaming. In fact, the same thing that everyone does. It is common knowledge that sleep has 2 phases, fast and slow. These phases alternate with each other while we sleep. And some mental pictures visit us in each of these stages, but the very hallucinogenic motor, emotional, and bizarre experiences with rich content come from REM sleep. And it is these that most researchers consider to be true dreams, and it is for this reason that at times I will put an equal sign between the REM phase and dreaming. At the time when Feynman was observing his dreams, the process of waking up frightened him. He said that at the moment of awakening, there was a moment in which you feel paralyzed. You feel like you're unable to wake up and move. You all know what it is and that this phenomenon is called sleep paralysis. But think about what it is. In the waking state, even when you're lying in bed and you think you are completely relaxed, there is still some degree of overall tension or tone in your muscles. This steady muscle humming can be easily detected if we connect special sensors to the body. When you enter the slow-wave sleep phase, some of this muscle tension disappears, but a significant portion remains. However, as the brain prepares to move into REM sleep, an impressive change occurs. Literally seconds before the dream phase begins, and you find yourself completely paralyzed. There is not the slightest tonus left in the muscles of your body, and your body itself shimmies like a rag doll, while your involuntary muscles, those that control instinctive contractions such as breathing and heartbeat, continue to function and sustain life during sleep. All other muscles relax. Try to move with willpower during sleep paralysis, and you will realize who is the boss of the house. This condition is caused by a powerful blocking signal that is transmitted from the oldest part of the brain stem, along the entire length of the spinal cord. Once this signal is transmitted, the pastoral muscles of the body, such as the biceps and quadriceps muscles of the legs, lose all tension and strength. They no longer respond to your brain's commands. In effect, you become a prisoner, imprisoned in the prison of REM sleep. You are roughly aware of how you lie down. You can control your breathing and eye movements, and you may even think you are able to move your arm, for example. But the transition from thought to movement takes an infinitely long time. What I do when I have sleep paralysis, and with my shitty sleep it happens quite often. I don't try to fight the feeling. I stuff it down and try to keep sleeping. And it always works because as soon as the REM sleep phase ends, your body is immediately released from its physical captivity. The irony is that in the dream phase, when your body is completely still, your brain becomes highly active, just as it would be as if you were awake, and by blocking muscle activity, your brain prevents you from doing in reality what you do in dreams. During REM sleep, a flurry of motor commands generated by dynamic dreams rush through the brain. In such a case, it is very wise of nature to sew a physiological straitjacket. You see, the brain has a whole system that blocks our movements during sleep. Isn't that the first proof that we need dreams for something? But for what? Many have tried to unravel the nature of dreams, with us attributed and divine origin and predictive power. Some believe that they are some kind of reflection of recent events occurring in reality. Freud, of course, founded a whole method of dream interpretation. He believed that dreams were generated by unsatisfied, unconscious desires. And these desires are so shocking that the brain has to metaphorize them. Because otherwise, if one saw one's naked self in a dream, one would inevitably wake up terrified. It's all bullshit, but don't blame Freud. He's just a man of his time. We are also men of our time, and we have MRI. The MRI showed us that during REM sleep, the part of the brain responsible for orderly logical thinking is shut down. That is, the part that sends instructions to the emotional center located deep in the brain, and at the same time, visual, emotional, and motor centers, as well as the department of autobiographical memory, are sharply activated. And it would seem that since the autobiographical memory section of the brain, including the hippocampus, is so active during REM sleep, one would expect dreams to contain a person's recent memories, what Freud described as the sediment of the day. Having conducted an experiment on the degree to which dreams correspond to our recent impressions, the precipitate of the day was found only 1–2% of the time. Thus, it is safe to say that dreams are not a complete reproduction of the events of our lives. We are not reproducing a videotape of the day's experiences on a large cortical screen. If there is some residue of the day, it is only a few drops in the general stream of unintelligible dreams. However, there was something really common, penetrating from reality to dream. It was the emotions experienced, emotional memories specifically. Up to 55% of the emotional themes and experiences that the participants of the experiment had experienced while awake were unambiguously manifested in the night visions. And this commonality was clear not only to the experts who conducted the experiment, but also to the participant of the experience. If there is one thing that runs through our daily life and our dreams, it is experience. Contrary to Freud's assumption, we see that there is no internal censor, no cover, there's no disguise. The sources of dreams are transparent, clear enough for anyone to identify and realize them without an outside interpreter. And that's the first key to understanding what the function of dreaming is. Because it's long been thought that dreaming is just a byproduct of REM sleep, like heat radiation from a light bulb, a side effect of light that has no function of its own, because nobody uses light bulbs as heaters. So dreams have three main functions, what you might call the dream triangle, each function connected to the others. That's what I was going to say when I read about the three functions of dreams. I thought there was a way to connect them, but they don't flow from each other at all. I have no idea how one phenomenon can be responsible for so many different things. First of all, if you have a misfortune in your life, you may hear the phrase, "time heals." What you are unlikely to have heard is that it's not time that heals, it's sleep with dreams. We all know that you can't make serious decisions at night, that the morning is wiser than the evening, that you should sleep with any idea first. And all of this is for a reason. Everyone's felt it. In the morning, yesterday's oppressive event doesn't seem so bad anymore. That's because REM sleep is the only time in the day when a person stops producing norepinephrine, a key chemical associated with stress. The brain during REM sleep processes depressing memories and themes in this neurochemically calm, safe environment. Think back to something horrible that happened to you 10 years ago? Notice, now those memories do not evoke the emotions that encompassed you at the time of the experience. You haven't forgotten anything, but the emotional component, at least a significant part of it, is gone from your memories. You can remember in detail what happened, but you cannot get back the emotions experienced at that moment. This is the merit of rapid dreaming sleep. It is he who separates the bitter emotional peel from the information-rich fruit. This is also confirmed by the fact that in a person after severe stress, there is an increase in the phase of REM sleep. You say, what does this have to do with dreaming? Well, yes, stress hormones are reduced. The brain readjusts itself. What does this have to do with the movies we see at night? The fact is that, according to studies, only those depressed patients who dreamed about events after a year were able to completely get rid of stress and recover. Other patients whose dreams did not reflect the harrowing experience were unable to detach themselves from the upsetting experience and remained depressed. Some warriors with a delicate mental organization get PTSD after seeing blood and dismemberment. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD for short. The main symptom of PTSD is high anxiety, just fear of life. And the second, constant for years, lasting nightmares so murderous that the unfortunate, sometimes even afraid to fall asleep, and all because during REM sleep in patients with PTSD violated the mechanism of production of stress hormones. The essence is that the brain on the standard program every night makes an attempt to look at the psychotraumatic situation impartially, separating the emotional coloring of the event from the event itself and replaying what happened in the dream. But in a person with PTSD during REM sleep, stress hormone production does not stop and healing does not occur. The person is terrified during the day, and at night the system designed to cure this kind of thing makes things worse. Second, look. And if you know any of the people in these photos with the horrible quality, there is a better than 50% chance that you will realize who it is. Our brains are monsters at recognizing faces and their expressions. The more familiar we are with a person, the easier it is for our brains to recognize them in a crowd or from a distance. This is a critical evolutionary mechanism driven by the need to distinguish between enemies and friends and understand their intentions. We almost unmistakably and practically bypassing consciousness read explicit and hidden mimic signals and determine by them the emotional state of fellow human beings. But it is worth depriving a person of dreaming and during REM sleep, and he will not be able to accurately decipher facial expressions. Moreover, a person can start mistaking friends for enemies not literally, but at the level of emotions, because it is precisely REM sleep at night performs recalibration of those parts of the brain that are responsible for recognizing faces. All of us sometimes remember dreaming about people's faces. Perhaps this is what a conscious reflection of this process looks like. Experiments show that the better a person had the quality of REM sleep during the night, the more accurately their brain copes with deciphering the emotion the next day. At the same time, when the same volunteers were deprived of REM sleep, they stopped distinguishing the nuances of emotional states. And whereas before they could clearly see the difference between kind and angry faces, now their brains were in a state of constant hypersensitivity, unable to pick up the nuances of emotional signals from the outside world. Gone was the ability to correctly read facial expression cues on another person's face. Sleep-deprived volunteers began to make mistakes, perceiving even positive facial expressions as negative. Third and most unexpected and awesome, it was this third thing that made me want to make this video. If humanity could survive without REM sleep, and we deprived it of REM sleep, in the future we would not have made any great discoveries that require hard work of thinking. Without this sleep function, we would not have known Galileo or Newton, nor would there have been any of Einstein's theory of relativity. The founding fathers would not have spawned quantum mechanics, nor would there have been any complex discoveries at the tip of a pen. Our most meaningful and logically sound scientific theories are a credit to the nonsense we dream. Dreams can be so absurd, it's not easy to sew. During sleep, the details of your memories merge and jumble, eventually presenting us in the dream with an unexpectedly new abstract vision of the situations we've experienced. During dreams, our brain analyzes impressive layers of acquired knowledge and then, combining units of information this way and that, extracts from the experience of some generalizing points, revealing their essence. We wake up with a much more organized web of reason, which is able to offer amazing solutions to previously unsolvable problems. Mendeleev is a surname known to any poorly educated person anywhere in the world. Yes, Mendeleev's periodic system of elements is the most popular and best illustration of the dream's ability to systematize knowledge, because it was created by a dream that a scientist had. Everyone knows about this story, but I'll remind you just in case. Mendeleev was a Russian chemist, if you don't know. He was, well, just obsessed with striving to find regularities in the properties of already known chemical elements. Having written down the chemical and physical properties of all the known elements on separate cards, the scientist maniacally at home in his study, on his travels, traveling, endlessly playing his impossible solitaire, trying to deduce the law that would explain how to put this picture together. For years, trying to solve this puzzle, he failed miserably. Well, on February 17th, 1869, in a dream, he did what he could never do in reality. The dream shuffled all the chemical elements swirling in Mendeleev's head, and in a moment of creative insight, arranged them on a grid, in which each row, period, and each column, group, took position according to atomic characteristics of each element. Here is what Mendeleev himself said about it. I saw in a dream a table in which all elements took their place. When I woke up, I immediately wrote it down on a piece of paper, and later only one place required correction. Of course, not everyone believes that having fallen asleep, Mendeleev saw the ready solution of the periodic system in its entirety and in all details. But no one doubts that the composition of the table appeared to the scientist in a dream. And this is not the only example of nocturnal revelation. Austrian-German pharmacologist Otto Loewe dreamed the scheme of an interesting experiment on two frog hearts, which would finally show how nerve cells communicate using chemicals that are transmitted using synapses. This discovery of Loewe's dream-inspired dream was later awarded the Nobel Prize to Paul McCartney, dreamed melodies and songs yesterday, and let it be. Of course, these are some pure absolute examples demonstrating the creative function of dreams, but rest assured, it happens to every person all the time on a smaller scale. You already have elements in your head to solve a lot of your problems, but those elements may not yet be properly put together and connected. The pieces of all sorts of life puzzles are stacked on top of each other from night to night, and you wake up with the prepared ground for consciously making some discovery. It all sounds beautiful, but what about the science? If we have any evidence that dreams are a source of, I hate that word, creativity? Aside from the chatter, what scientific evidence do we have? Testing a sleeping brain is very difficult, well, because it's asleep. You can't give a sleeping person a test to determine creativity, so you have to do some interesting tricks. Matthew Walker is the author of this book. If anything, almost the entire video is based on this book. So Matthew Walker developed a test that was designed to address this problem as much as possible. There's a phenomenon that almost everybody experiences almost every morning: sleep inertia, the transition of the brain from a sleepy state to an awake state. The frontal cortex, the area of our brain responsible for decision-making and self-control, is not activated immediately, but gradually over the first 20 to 30 minutes after waking up. All this time, our memory, reaction time, alertness, and ability to perform complex analytical tasks are reduced. The person is dull and easily frustrated, and Walker wondered if this short period of sleep inertia could be used to benefit the experiment. To do so, he decided to wake the volunteers at different stages of REM and REM sleep by having them solve anagrams. Apparently, anagrams are not a particularly difficult analytical task for someone who has just woken up. To make the experiment more accurate, each word consisted of 5 letters, and the riddle had only one correct solution. The study participants were explained the scheme of the experiment and put to sleep. The volunteers who fell asleep were awakened 4 times during the night, twice during the slow wave, shallow, and deep sleep phases, and twice during the REM sleep phase. When the subject was awakened, he or she had to solve anagrams, each of which appeared on the screen for only a few seconds. The volunteer only had to sound out the correct answer, if he had one. Each stage of testing lasted only 90 seconds, so to speak, to skim the cream of the crop, and of course Maddie Walker recorded how many correct answers each participant of the experiment gave. Then the subjects fell asleep again. The results were quite fascinating. Waking up in the phase of slow sleep, the subjects did not show much creative enthusiasm and solved only a few riddles shorthand. But when they were awakened in REM sleep, that is, in the dreaming phase, things were different. Problem-solving ability simply skyrocketed, and participants solved up to 35% more riddles than in the first case, or even while awake. What's more, after coming out of the REM phase, the time it took to find solutions decreased dramatically. As one of the participants in the experiment said, the solution just popped into his head on its own. Using the same experimental method of waking up, Walker's colleague Stick Gold conducted another interesting test, which confirmed that the brain during the dreaming phase of REM sleep functions completely differently when it comes to the work of creative memory. Stick Gold measured how these associative networks of information functioned on 3 occasions, just in the afternoon during wakefulness, when awakening from slow-wave sleep and when awakening from REM sleep. When you awaken the brain from slow-wave sleep or measure its functioning during the day, the principles of brain activity are closely and logically connected, as we see in the diagram. However, when you wake up the brain during REM sleep, the algorithm of actions is completely different. The hierarchy of logical associative connections disappeared. The brain in REM sleep was completely uninterested in trivial common-sense connections and step-by-step associations. Instead, it bypassed obvious connections, preferring to use concepts with a low degree of relatedness. During dreams in the REM phase, the guards of logic completely forgot about their service. The results showed that this kind of brain activity can produce anything, and the more bizarre it is, the better. 2 experiments involving the solution of anagrams by semantic fields revealed how radically different the brain works during dreaming compared to any other period. When we enter the stage of REM sleep and a dream occurs, memory blocks begin to mix, and in this state we are no longer constrained to see the most typical and obvious connections between units of information. On the contrary, the brain is actively inclined to search for the most distant and obscure conjunctions between situations from its experience. This is why dreams are so absurdly variable. So, in Feynman's dream, playing billiards and billiard balls could be associated with trying to build relationships with different girls. During wakefulness, turning to your memory lofts is like looking at the stars through the wrong side of a telescope. So you get a hyper-focused, narrow vision that can't possibly encompass the informational cosmos offered by the brain. When we're awake, we notice only a small fraction of the possible interconnections of memory. But when we enter the dream state in sleep, the picture is reversed. Now we are looking through a telescope through its right end, thus looking through the vast layers of our memory. And looking at the whole constellation of stored information, we are able to notice its various combinations. It is sleep that builds connections between distantly related information elements that are not visible in the light of daytime wakefulness. This is the difference between knowledge, retaining individual facts and wisdom, understanding what they mean when put together, or simply put, memorization versus understanding. REM sleep allows our brains to go beyond the former and truly master the latter. Thus, an experienced physician who seems to intuitively make an accurate diagnosis actually relies on the many symptomatic subtleties he or she observes in a patient. This type of ability to generalize comes only with years of experience, but he also represents a kind of extract of the REM effect. A perfect example would be ideas that derive complex grammatical structures in a language not yet mastered. Even a 1.5-year-old baby can put together a very complex phrase if he sleeps after hearing something similar for the first time. Perhaps the most striking evidence of the existence of sleep-generated insight obtained as a result of an experiment conducted by Dr. Ulrich Wagner from the University of Lübeck in Germany. Before the experiment began, volunteers were briefly familiarized with the principle of solving very tedious tasks. However, in these tasks, there would be a hidden common algorithm that greatly simplified the solution, speeding up. No one told the participants about this algorithm, of course. It should be noted that the participants were divided into 2 groups. The first group solved the problems in the morning, and then they were released for a walk for 12 hours. In the evening of the same day, they had to come back and solve hundreds more of the same stultifying exercises. The second group came to the first stage in the evening, and to the second stage in the morning, after a good night's sleep. In the first group, after a 12-hour break, when they could consciously think about the problem as much as they wanted, only a measly 20% of the participants were able to extract the built-in shortest solution. But in the second group of participants of those that had a full night's sleep, nearly 60% experienced a moment of insight when they returned, having found the simplest algorithm to solve tedious tasks, even though they didn't have that much time to think, for they were asleep. Sleep tripled the likelihood of creative solutions. Some would say, well, yes, but what about the great minds who slept very little and yet showed great creativity? Thomas Edison, for example, slept only a few hours a day, and at the same time he had 1093 patents in the USA alone and about 3,000 in other countries of the world. Well, first of all, he supposedly only slept a few hours a night. We'll never know if he really slept as little as some people claim, including, incidentally, himself. But nevertheless, 4,000 patents. How? It is accurately known that Edison had a habit of taking naps during the day. He recognized the creative potential of dreams and ruthlessly exploited this tool, describing it as a genius break. Edison is said to have seated himself in a chair near his desk. On the desk, he placed a notebook and pen. Under the right armrest of the chair, on the floor, was a metal skillet. Clasping a few bearings in his right hand, Edison let sleep completely consume him. Once he began to dream, his muscle tone would relax, and he would release balls that would fall on the pan and wake him up. Then Edison would write down all the creative ideas that flooded his brain during the dream. Genius, isn't he? Given the potential of a state called dreaming, it's no wonder the author of this book makes such a claim. That humans can control their dreams, it's a new stage of evolution. From my point of view, like the Psycho video, it's a bit of a mouthful, and you can probably learn to control your dreams. Almost anyone can, given the right amount of effort. To do and create whatever and however you want, there's no purer form of creativity. Matthew Walker even writes, maybe in the not-too-distant future, such people will make up a special cohort that will be able to solve many creative problems and meet the challenges facing humanity. No, people go into conscious dreams to have fun, not to solve super problems. I would do the same, but even if you, like me, are not brilliant enough to control your dreams, just watch them, because we are all geniuses when we dream.